Likutei Torah, Parshas Balak, page 146. We're in the middle of Eis Beis. Start like 15 lines in the end of the first column. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe is explaining the whole inyan of Yaakov and Yisrael. So, I mean, there's a lot of others over there. But anyway, what is the ultimate level of the neshama coming into the body? So the Alter Rebbe says the real answer is to become Bali Tshuva. And he says before the neshama comes into the body, it's the level of tzaddikim. Then it comes into the body where it has a level of Avedis, because really there's nothing separating Hashem and Yidden. The only thing that separates Hashem, even a mechitza shel barzel, even an iron curtain cannot separate a Jew from Hashem, but only when a Yid sins. Like the pasuk says, "Kavin yisechem avdila," because your Avedis separate. So he gives what the Alter Rebbe says in the Teshuva, that when you blow somewhere, vayibach b'apad nishmas chayim, Hashem blew the neshama into Adam Rishon. So when you blow and there's something blocking it, so you can't get where you're doing it. So what is this thing that actually blocks Elokus being revealed? Is the level of the Avedis. Okay. So he says now, we're in, again, like 15 lines in the end of the first column of 146. We're in, it says in the pasuk, Yaakov Chava Nachalasi. Yaakov is the rope of Hashem's inheritance. Meaning, by day, Shadam Mashbal Esatzme. To this, that a person lowers himself, laham shechatayv is gashmi be'israfil beheter, whether it's forbidden or even permissible temptations. Shem nimshochem miachelos aklipa, geidem bezel lemayla, also causes lemayla slapshus hashpos heitato, betzes fizdunega. Again, Hashem reacts to the way we act. When we lower ourselves into evil by doing, even he says, even pleasurable taivas, permissible pleasures. But we lower ourselves into klipa. So the same thing what happens with Hashem. Hashem lowers himself into the hay of Hashem's name, gets lost into klipa. Therefore, when the person does tshuva, and he uproots himself from the pushkaiten, from the emptiness of the world, so then the hay of Hashem's name that until now is giving chayis to klipa, so because we removed ourselves from that level of evil, so Hashem removes himself from giving chayis to klipa. This is what we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. Now he's back to be ours. This he left because we were involved in evil. Now he came back. What the Gemara says in the Yud Gimel Midas Rachma, Hashem Kel Rachma V'nakei. What does it mean? The Gemara says Menakehu l'shav. Hashem cleans the returning. There are people that do tshuva. To wash and to cleanse their souls. So this is one. So the Alter Rebbe said at the beginning over there, there's 3 levels of tshuva. Okay? One is sur meira betachlis. So he went into this whole long thing until now. In your Avedis, you do Avedis, you lower yourself into klipa. Even Taivas Heter, you lower yourself into klipa. Hashem lowers himself into klipa. So tshuva is Teshuva. Hey, we're returning that level of faith. That's the first level. But tshuva Shein is, and he said before, that's sur meira. Okay? The second level of tshuva is tshuva chinas asei teiv, meaning afa pishu sur meira betachlis. Even though the person turns away from evil completely, he doesn't sin. He doesn't transgress any negative commandments. He doesn't have taivas, permissible or forbidden ones. He limits himself in the amount of mitzvahs and doing good, to be diligent in Torah and davening, which is the level of atzlus, laziness. Okay, you don't sin, but that's why in Medrashim and Gemaras it says there's Gehenim Shel Sheleg and Gehenim Shel Eish. There's a fiery Gehenim and there's a snowy Gehenim. So it says for negative commandments that you acted negatively, So therefore you get spiritually dirty, impure. So the fire cleans. You want to clean your garment, use hot water. Hot water cleans. But then there's a Gan V'Shel Sheleg. Gan V'Shel Sheleg, it says, it's for not keeping positive mitzvahs. You're too lazy. So what happens? You get it, thrown into the ice. Sheleg, it wakes you up. You wake up, so you get unlazy. That's what the pasuk says until them. Ein eisetev, ein gam echad. Ein eisetev, ein gam echad. It's a pasuk until them. Upirish, ma'ama shakiris arba perikuf mem hey. What does it mean? Shahidei zegein mistalkus teva elyon. You cause the level of good to leave, which is the level of Yesod. Because Yesod is the level of Yosef, which is tzaddik, which is tev. Ve'inyan k'mesha kosuv imru tzaddik ki tev. Say to the tzaddik that it's good. Meaning, k'midas tzaddik who is kashrus v'schabes is the binding. What is a tzaddik? A tzaddik is one who is bound and connected to Hashem. His kashrus v'schabes. Hamshoch ha'mechinas seviv kol almin, that you bring down this level of seviv kol almin, nimshoch ha'mer bechinas pnimis, into level of mamala kol almin, which is called yichud kudsha brichu shchinte. When a person does a positive mitzvah, okay? So many nuschois, we don't, but many nuschois say, l'shem yichud kudsha brichu shchinte, before you put on talis, tefillin, whatever it is. There's a whole Hashem Yichud that they say. Basically, what are they saying? They don't learn Chassidus, they don't know what they're saying. But what they're basically saying is that when we do this mitzvah, we're uniting the level of Kodesh Baruch Hu and Shechina. L'Shem Yichud, Kusha B'richu Shechinte. Now, Kodesh Baruch Hu is the 6 fetus of Zoh. Chesed Gvur Tveres and Asachid Yisayid. Shechina is Malchus. Malchus goes into the next world. Shechina is Shechem, rests into the next world. So when a person does a Seitev, that he says here you're lacking, so you have Yichud Kudsha B'richu Shechinte. You have the Yichud of Hashem, the Kodesh Baruch Hu and the Shechina, meaning the unity of Zoh and Malchus. Now Zoh is the masculine level, and Malchus is the feminine level. Therefore in Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud is Chachma, which is masculine in Hebrew. Hey is Bina, which is feminine. Now from the Yud, when it comes into the kids, next generation, so you have son and daughter. Father, mother, son and daughter. That's the completeness of plural, the whole thing. So that's the name of Hashem, is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud is the father, Hey is the mother, Vav is the son, Hey is the daughter. So what happens to the Yud? When it comes down, it becomes a Vav. So that's the level of the 6 fetus of Zoh. And then you have the Hey, which is the daughter, that's the feminine of Bina. The mother, Ema Banim Smecha, the mother is Bina, the father is Chachma. So then it comes down, so it's father, son and daughter. Now when you have a male and a female separate, you don't create offshoots. You don't create children. When there's a unity between male and female, so then you create new revelations called children. Or brats, or whatever you want to call them. You create new entities. So now, when a Yid does a mitzvah, what happens is, like this, in the Seder Shtaushis of the worlds, there's, Seichel comes into Midas, and it's all Ila Va'olu. It's cause and effect, the Shtaushis. What happens when a person does a mitzvah? So we cause a greater level of Kedusha in the world. How do we create this level of Kedusha in the world? Because when you do a mitzvah, what you're actually doing is you're causing a yichud between Kudsha B'richu and Malchus and Zoh, Kodesh Baruch Hu Shechinte, and then through this you reveal a greater Gilui of Elokus into the world. So he says, what happens when a person does a positive mitzvah? They reveal the level of Havaya into Elokim. Because again, everything is relative. Relatively speaking, Zoh is Havaya and Malchus is Elokim. Because Malchus is Mitzamtzim to go into the next world. So that's what you have the Gilui Kodesh Baruch Hu Shechinte. So that's when a person does mitzvahs. But this guy is lazy, so he's lacking in the level of Yichud Kodesh Baruch Hu Shechinte to bring down Elokus from Seviv into Mamala. First of all, right now he's not saying it's connected to Hashem. Right now he's saying it's connected, what he's not saying yet is to a bracha. Baruch Ata, bring down the level of Ata, because mitzvahs are connected to Tatzmut Ein Sof, that by bringing down the level of Ata, then you can have a yichud of Havaya and Elokeinu. Because normally Havaya is infinite, Elokeinu is limited, right? But the whole inyan is to bring Havaya into Elokeinu, to bring Kudsha B'ruch Shchintei, to bring down Seviv into Mamala. Now the only way you can combine two opposites of Seviv and Mamala, Havaya infinite, Elokim limited, is only by bringing down a level higher than both. So that's the level of Ata. So when you say Baruch Ata, you're basically saying, we're doing this mitzvah to be Mamshich, to bring down Ata, the essence of Hashem, which allows Havaya to become Elokeinu, the infinite to become finite, and through this, Melech HaOlam. So basically, what we say when we make a bracha, that's why we don't say it every day. By every mitzvah, Shem Kudsha B'ruch Shchintei. The Rabbi Rashab writes, in Samach to Samach, he writes, but we want to verbally say it at least once a day. Clearly, Shem Yichud Kudsha. So we say it once a day before Baruch Shamar. That's the whole. But really, there's a famous story, the Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek, I think it was, came to the Kotzker, and he said, how do you guys teach a bracha? How do you define a bracha? So he told them, Baruch, the Imam Sheikh Atzmas, Havaya, Elokeinu, Melech HaOlam. So he said, the Kotzker said, now I understand why you guys don't say L'Shem Yichud Kudsha B'ruch Shchintei. Because you're saying it in the bracha. That's what the bracha is.
If Yud is connected to Vav, because it's just an elongated Yud, that means that Father is really connected to Son more, but we know that usually it's the opposite. Father is connected to daughter, and mother is connected to son.
No, Ishmael Zast Chiliyas Nekeva, and that, but that's only in the formation of it. In the essence, B'ra Kara Davu, a child is connected to the father. Ima Kabita, like mother, like daughter, which we learn out by Leah, by Teitze Leah, and then Dinah, by Teitze Dinah, and that's why she was caught by Shechem, the whole story. And Rashi says that's the expression Ki Ima Kabita, like mother, like daughter, which is really a Rashi and Chumash, it's a Medrash. But Ki Ima Kabita. A father is more halachically connected. It's interesting, even halachically, God forbid, I'm not talking about in the courts today, but halachically, if a couple divorces, who gets custody of the kids? So it's a clear din Shulchan Aruch that if the kids are under 6, they need the mother. So all the kids under 6 go with the mother. Over 6, the boys go to the father and the girls go to the mother. Because the fathers raise the boys and the girls raise the mother to teach them what they need to know. So that's the connection. So that's the level of the Yud becoming above. What?
Does that provide that the father is still religious?
Yeah, I'm not, today's a whole different world. I'm talking about in Shulchan Aruch, in Even Ezra, that's what it says. But realistically, it's not done today for a lot of reasons. Okay, Vayim Sefer Shalbeinim, Perak Mamal V'Zad V'Sechem. Okay, second column. Over a mass of Zel Inyan Oived Elokim. That's the level of Oived Elokim, which is explained in Tanya Perak Tazvav. Shumalashin Eiris Havudim, which Oived Elokim literally means Oived, one who serves Hashem, like an Eved. But Chassidus explains out the Rebbe is saying here now that Oived comes from the word of the Malachim Ma'abed with an ayin, which means to tan the hides, which means you take a coarse piece of hide and you make it, you work it through that it becomes parchment, shoes, whatever, leather. So he said, what is Eved Elokim? Lashon Eiris Havudim. Refined hide. So what happens when a person does positive mitzvahs? So negative mitzvahs, keeping it means you don't bring evil into the world. When you transgress a negative mitzvah, you're bringing elokus into garbage, into golos. But positive mitzvahs, on the other hand, is bringing elukus into the world. So he says, what happens? So then, what does positive mitzvahs do? There's a hester, Helen v'hester comes from the symptom of Shem Elokim. Right? There's a concealment of godliness. So now when you do a positive mitzvah, you reveal godliness into the world. Which means, in very simple language, that you're taking off the concealment. If you reveal godliness in the world, you're removing the symptom of Elokim. But you make an effort, to fight your nature, and it could be a good nature. Like it says, the difference, one of the million differences between Chassidus and Musar. Musar is the shanes mideisav hativiyim. Musar, the purpose of Musar, it's brought down in all Sfarim, is to change your bad midas. Naturally, the nature of a person, take a kid, he's self-centered, adults are too, self-centered, selfish, not nice. You have to teach a child to share, to give, you have to teach the child. Adam ayer perivoda, a person is basically born a vildachaya, a wild beast. So he says, what do? You have to fight your nature and the Yetzer, that through this he brings down Yichud Elyon, the unity of Shemesh U'Mogen Havaya Elokim, Shelo Yastir HaMogen V'Nartek, that now the concealment doesn't exist. So basically, the Alter Rebbe is explaining the difference between the first level of tshuva is for Sur Merah, right? But what does that mean? Because a person through sins brought Elokus into evil. We went into evil, and therefore we schlepped Elokus down. Yaakov Chavon Nachlosei, a rope, you go pull the rope down, the guy on top also comes down. So we go down, Hashem comes down with us. So tshuva is returning Hashem out of evil. Then he says there's a second level, Sumerev Asei Teiv is not doing the positive mitzvahs, with breaking your nature, like he says. So I missed the second point. Chassidus accomplishment is not to change our bad midas. That's what Musar is. Musar means with Surmera, you tell it, don't do this, don't be lashon hara, don't do this, don't do the binti, all those things. Chassidus comes along and does something additional, not instead, something additional. L'shanes mideisav hativiyim. Teva mideisav. I'm sorry. L'shanes teva mideisav means to change the nature of your midas, meaning even the good midas. Musar is to get rid of the bad midas to do good midas. Chassidus takes it a step further, especially in Perek Tzav of Tanya, to become an Eved Elokim 101 times to break your nature. So that is to change your good midas. And that's what he says, to fight with your teva, even in the good things. And then you cause Shemesh U'Mogen Havaya Elokim. That's what you cause the Yichud HaKudsha B'Richu Shchinte, which is Shemesh and Elokim, the Shemesh and the Mogen, Shlo Yaska Kin Shilav Adnai Ba'Havaya. That combining the level of Adnai and Havaya, Umamtik and Magvoris B'Chsadim, and you sweeten the level of Gvura with Chesed, which is through the Yichud. L'chein, K'she'ein Eisen Tev K'daboy, when you don't, he doesn't say you don't do good. You do good, but not enough, the way it's supposed to be. Geirim is Kabir Sadinim. Then you're not bringing Kedusha into the world, so you're strengthening the level of Gvura. It strengthens the evil with the world with bad. When you do this higher level of Yichud, Torah mitzvahs, which is Gili or like you said before, what is the purpose of mitzvahs? To reveal Seviv into Mamala, meaning to bring additional Kedusha. Mamala is a level of Elokus which is limited. It's coming into each place individually. So it's Tzimtzum. Zai Gamagvurs, the Malachim, then all these things become sweetened, And okay, so he says like the Ramaz, something which is higher, shama b'gam yesir, the blemish is greater. In other words, on a cleaner garment, a very small stain or speck is more noticeable than on a dirty garment, right? The Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaktik b'tzadikim k'chut hasayra. Hashem is particular with tzadikim like the width of a hair. That's why in last week's parsha, when Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock, halavai, that should be our big avera that we do, okay? And because of that, he couldn't go into Eretz Yisrael, which was his dream. Why? Because he hit the rock. Big deal. Still, water came out. He still praised Hashem's name. What did he do wrong already? So the Medrash says, because of Kodesh Baruch Hu, the cleaner you are, the cleaner the garment, the very small speck is more noticeable. Pirush Shamish and Ishmasi Gavoya. A person whose neshama is greater, as I pray gemachet, then the sin is worse. Be batli ma'aseitain, even when he doesn't do good, because he's not an Eved Elikim. In other words, Alter Rebbe is saying, not only when you do Mirah do you bring evil into the world, but when you're not bringing Kedusha into the world, so then the hide is still coarse. You're not doing mitzvahs to bring the Gili Alukus into the world. So if you're not bringing Gili Alukus into the world, so then evil dominates. You're not actively doing evil. That's why there's no punishment for positive mitzvahs, except Bris Milah and Korban Pesach, as they're called, the two bloody mitzvahs, Dam Pesach, Dam Milah, that the punishment is Kaddish. But normally, for not putting on tefillin, not wearing tzitzis, you don't get punished, because punishment is a cleansing. If you're not dirty, you don't get cleansed. So if you don't put on tefillin, you didn't get dirty, you didn't do eat chazir, that you actively brought evil onto yourself by doing an active act of evil. That you lowered a lukus into evil, and you got evil on yourself, you need to be cleansed. You don't do a positive mitzvah, you're basically not bringing Kedusha into the world, but you don't need to get cleansed. What you need to get is Ganim Shoshali, you need a wake-up call. You need to be woken up. But he says the fact that you don't bring more Kedusha into the world means that evil is still stronger, in a passive way rather than in an active way. It's not active bringing evil into the world, but in a passive way you're bringing evil into the world. Here, v'yaisei gadol hanefila shalei, and therefore the nefila of a big tzaddik who doesn't keep a positive mitzvah the way it should be is worse. Me'aven shal ish hameini is worse than a regular pet. Hameini means just tameinam, the regular people, the masses, which is not sur meira. So he says, if a person, a tzaddik who doesn't keep his level of asay teiv, is worse than a person who sins, sur meira. So in other words, that's why it says you can't judge people, because what's demanded from you, let's say it's very, put it into a practical way. A frum yid who knows, who's supposed to keep, and slacks off in his observance of mitzvah, he might not sin. He keeps kosher, he keeps Shabbos, he keeps all this stuff, yeah? But he doesn't do asay teiv like he should. So here the Alter Rebbe says that's worse than a hameina who sins, who's mechalo Shabbos and doesn't keep kosher, because the greater the person, in a certain extent, not lavdafked in the sham only. If you're a firm person, you should, everybody's mother used to tell them, you should have known better. You, my tzurka pushka, my God's gift to the world that I gave birth to. You should have known better. You should know. Everybody else I don't care about. You should have known better. Hashem says to the tzaddik also, you should have known better. So the Alter Rebbe says it's a very sharp thing, by the way. He says you're worse than the Amoinam that does Sur Meira. So he says, why? And therefore, by the way, you can never judge anybody. Because the question is, like the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Lamed of Tanya, are we demanding from ourselves the same thing we're demanding from a guy who's not from? Come to a guy who's not from, yeah? He's not Shem Shabbos. You tell him, no, you got to be Shem Shabbos. Yeah? He's losing 70% of his retail business, which is primarily on Shabbos. Or you come to another guy and says, well, we expect it from him. What do you have to be? Torah says you have to be Shem Shabbos. You come to a guy who loves tifres, and you tell him, no, you can't eat all this stuff. You know, you have to keep kosher. And then you tell him there's a chol v'yisrael, you can't even eat Haagen-Dazs. You tell him all the stuff that he can't do, you know, and you expect him to do it. So now the Rebbe says in Tanya, are you demanding from yourself in your things? You don't have a problem with kashrus. You don't have a problem with Shabbos. But in your asay teiv, are you demanding the same self-sacrifice from yourself that you're demanding from this person who's not from? So think about it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't demand from the person. But if you're demanding from the person, you have to demand from yourself. Because in a certain respect, then you're worse than that guy. So he says, because Ksiv Adam Eitz Sada, Shebchin is Sherish Shamas Adam. The Sherish of Nishmas Adam of the person comes in the level of 8, which is, like it says in the Pasuk, Sada Sheberachi Hashem, the field that Hashem blessed, meaning Gan Eden, V'ine al derech mashal eitz eisepri. In a tree that makes fruits, sheyesh be'peider shelemata samach l'oretz. There are certain fruits that grow closer to the ground. You know, you could just stand and pick them off. V'yesh peider shelemala gaveya megaveya. Okay? Yeah, and there's fruits that are higher up on the tree. He says, in a peider shelemala, im shemal yeinim yeiser, even though they're higher, but we learned this last night. When they come down, and the wind comes and blows and the fruits fall down, so the higher ones fall further away from the original place. More than the ones that are growing lamata. Even okay? So he says the bottom line is, many places in Chassidus gives a mush of a wall, right? When the wall falls down, the higher part of the wall falls further away from the original place of the wall than the bottom does. So therefore, neshama that come mi'igra rama, k'may mirazal, mi'igra rama lebira mikta, or darazal mirazal, lefi gedulasi, according to about people that felt bad all the way down. It says, based on his greatness, that's what his mapala was. That's what his downfall was. Therefore, it says in the Medrash by Megillah and other places, before Hashem loves us very much. So when he wants to punish the Jews, he doesn't have a little yukol punish the Jews. He makes a guy powerful, like a Haman, a Hitler, a Stalin, a Khomeini, you know, all these are very powerful. Then at least when he punishes the Jews, it's not felt the same, you know, embarrassment as when a little nobody does it to a Jew. But that's why we learned, why is the parsha called Balak? I mean, all these things. Because in the source it's super high, and therefore when it comes down into super low. In other words, the source in Kedusha of Shosh Klippus HaTameis is higher than Klippus Nega. And higher than Neshama for that matter. So he says, the same thing in the 8. Okay, it's not allowed to go over time.